probably chased a good 160 or 170 of them, but I only bought 17 of them. And the reason I didn't buy the rest of them, I would have, but the reason I didn't buy the rest of them was because they weren't ready. They were totally disorganized. The owner had an unrealistic expectation of what the enterprise value really was.
Welcome to the Building to Scale podcast, where we bring real entrepreneur stories that showcase the challenges and successes in building and scaling an entrepreneurial business. Our host, Jeff Chastain, is a business transformation coach with Admentis, where he coaches business leaders and their teams with a proven set of principles and tools, helping them gain clarity in and get more of what they want from their business. Make sure to stick around until the end of the show, and we will reveal how you can become our next guest.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Chastain here with another episode of the Building to Scale podcast, where I get the opportunity really to speak with entrepreneurial business leaders and influencers, thought leaders, people here within our market here that really just have that kind of insight, that expertise of owning and running their own businesses, as well as the opportunities that they're involved with today. So today's guest here with me is Tom Bronson with Mastery Partners. And in talking with Tom before, he's one of those where basically you can ask him any question. He's been involved in that scenario with business, and especially with his focus these days. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. But first off, Tom, I just wanted to say welcome to the show, and thank you for taking a bit out of your time here to come join us.
Hey, I'm so thrilled to be here. This is a very exciting opportunity to talk with your audience and talk about kind of the path that got me to where I am.
It's been interesting talking because in the different people I've talked with over the time with the podcast, there's common themes, but at the same time, everybody's just had a completely different path getting into this, getting into business in general. That we've had the serial entrepreneurs that started out selling brownies and cookies and stuff as the Boy Scout, and we've had others that were just complete accidental, completely fell into it, wasn't ever the plan, which is almost more my personal story. So guess going down that path, tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got to where you are today.
Well, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, right? My parents owned a business in North Carolina, and so I grew up being around entrepreneurs all the time. Although never really wanted to be an entrepreneur. You know, when I went to college, I studied marketing, media, journalism, and computer science. And
Interesting combination.
So my objective was to go out and work for a big company and that kind of thing. But as soon as I got out of school, I got hired by a small entrepreneurial company, and then very quickly I started a new company on my own, which was a advertising business that focused exclusively on the medical market. And then ultimately, so that would have been in 85, did that for a few years, had a couple of other businesses in there. So those were startups kind of taking on, ultimately sold those. And then my brother and I actually bought our parents' company from them in 1989. And with the intent of really growing it. It was a decent platform, but it was a tiny little business, doing $2 million in revenue. And so our objective was to grow that business. It was doing medical products to hospitals, doctors' office, things like that, specifically focused on radiology. And when we bought it in 89, we grew the business from 2 million to 20 million by 95. And then we decided that we were having challenges in the marketplace, competing against the one big national player doing what we were doing. And so we got into conversations with other regional kind of players like ourselves. And ultimately, 6 months after starting those conversations, we merged 5 companies together in the Southeast. And by the way, without having investment bankers, without having other advisors, these were business owners all getting together, having conversation, agreeing on our methodologies, and then merging our companies together. So there we were with a $60 million business almost overnight, 6 months later. And then we went on an acquisition spree and bought a bunch of additional companies. We ultimately sold that business to a big publicly traded company. And I went to work for them. And that's when I discovered something interesting about myself. And that is, I am a great CEO. I know how to lead the business. I know how to run a business. I know how to drive efficiencies. I know how to grow sales. I am a terrible employee.
Yeah, and that's really the story of most entrepreneurs. That's why we
Yeah,
got into entrepreneurial and starting businesses, because we
yeah,
can't take
yeah.
orders very well.
So, but under kind of their umbrella, between when we merged those companies together and when I left the business, we did 72 additional acquisitions using their publicly traded stock as our trading commodity. And then I left that and I was like, okay, I want to go back and do something small. So I went and found a really small, tiny $500,000 a year software company. It was based here in North Texas. I had 13 employees. We had a terrible reputation. The product was mediocre, and our employees were kind of like the island of misfit toys. And so I thought, well, this is perfect for me.
Yeah,
Somewhere
I
to
was going to
go
say,
and
sounds like a
fix
great
things.
opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, something I can go in and fix and turn around and move it on. And over the next several years, we grew that business. I took on some investment capital in 2010. We ultimately did 17 additional acquisitions in that business, and I transitioned out of that, sold it to a big publicly traded company in 2018. And interestingly enough, that's where I kind of unveiled that whole revelation about myself to the buyer, because they really wanted me to come on board and work with them. And I said, hey, unless you want me to be the CEO of your company, then you don't want me. And
Yeah.
so, because I'm a terrible employee, and so then my whole team who was with me kind of look. So by the way, when we closed that transaction, that was our 100th transaction. So I have bought or sold 100 businesses in my career, and 100% of them successfully, by the way. So now I didn't get exactly what I was hoping for in some cases, but we were able to exit every one of them. And so my team, who had been kind of working with me through these acquisitions and in the operation of the business, noticed when we were getting close to the transaction that that I wasn't actually doing due diligence on any other acquisitions, and they thought, "What, are we done?" So a couple of them came to me and said, "Are we done here? We don't see you going out and buying any companies. And by the way, we would know because we would be doing the due diligence." And I said, "Yeah, I want to think about this differently now." And they said, "Why is that?" And I said, here's the situation. When we bought those 17 companies at the last business in the technology company, I probably looked at 250 businesses to acquire, but I only bought 17 of them. I probably chased a good 160 or 170 of them, but I only bought 17 of them. And the reason I didn't buy the rest of them, I would have, but the reason I didn't buy the rest of them was because they weren't ready. They were totally disorganized. The owner had an unrealistic expectation of what the enterprise value really was. And by the way, we were paying top dollar for the industry at the time. And so I said, guys, I think there's an epidemic out there. And we started doing some research on business transactions. It's really hard to find. There's no MLS for business transactions. You can't go online and go, oh, gee, how many companies sold last week? How many are on the market, right? And you can't do that with businesses. Many transactions are never even reported. A great example of that is when I sold my last business to a big publicly traded company. We came underneath the Canadian threshold for reporting at the time. And so that transaction was never reported anywhere. Nobody would even know it, except my bank account knew it. And so it's hard to find data on that. But of the data I can find, and we went on a real spree here to go and find as much data as we could on business transactions. We came to the conclusion that each year in the category of what I call small business, which is under 100 million in revenue. So that's kind of that lower middle market down to small business. Each year, about 250,000 of them come on the market, but only 42,000 actually close a transaction, which is a whopping 17% success rate.
Ouch.
And I said, that's a problem, but I already knew why, right? Unrealistic owner expectations, businesses are not ready for it. There's no strategy in place. And so we started our new business, which is Mastery Partners, to really focus on helping business owners understand how to create a great exit strategy and then execute that strategy to get all the way to the end. So really, really long-winded answer to your question, how do I get started? But let me take a break and let you ask me something else.
Yeah, no worries at all. No, it's actually very interesting because honestly, a lot of the people I'm typically talking to are those business owners. They're the ones that are still in business number two or business number three here, looking to grow it. And that's really where a lot of their focus is just say, okay, the here and now, right now, what do I need to do in order to grow this business? That in the back of their mind, they're thinking, yeah, it'd be nice to go sell it or something like that. That's their kind of long term, really fuzzy picture out there. But that's really
Yep.
where most of them are. So I guess my question to you is, you've obviously bought and sold a number of businesses. So what are you typically looking for in that business? What made those 17 more specifically? Because I know you painted a couple broad brushstrokes over, but what drives those businesses to top of mind to say, hey, if somebody's really looking to long-term plan sell, what's the key characteristics here when you're saying unrealistic expectations or execution? What does that mean? Take that. Can you take that apart a little bit more?
Yeah, so unrealistic expectations. Most business owners have no idea what their business is worth. They create in their mind a scenario where they think it's worth X, and it's almost always based on anecdotes or anecdotal stories that they hear. So a great example of that is, well, gee, my buddy down at the country club who I play golf with on Saturday just sold his business for $20 million. So mine must be also worth 20 million. I need $20 million for mine, right? Well, okay, what business was he in? What were you guys in exactly the same business, doing the same revenue, doing the same earnings? What was it in? But they get in their mind that, oh gosh, he sold his for that. I must be worth that too. So that's one example. Another example is that because I just shared with you that most transactions are not reported. Most people don't really understand how businesses are valued and how buyers would value a business. And so, most small transactions, you'll never see them anywhere. You can go look at listings on the different websites and whatnot, the biz buy sells and things like that. But you don't really see what the transaction looks like. And so you don't really have an understanding of what your business, how is a business in my sector valued by buyers. And so, most small businesses are valued based on an equation of earnings, right? It's some multiple of earnings. And that's 99% of all transactions that happen. It's on a basis of multiple earnings, unless you have some sort of disruptive technology. Uber, think
Yeah.
Uber. If you're the Uber of your industry, then you can trade on some ridiculous multiple, right? But those are the transactions that get in the news, when Uber raises money, or when, in the early days when Microsoft and Apple were raising money, they're raising at these ridiculous valuations because they were disruptive, right? But most businesses, 99.99% of business, just like Dove soap, right? 99.97% pure. Most businesses are going to transact on a multiple of earnings. So the business needs to make money unless there's some other underlying circumstance that gets there. So that's kind of issue number one. Um, and then you got to look at how multiples are in an industry. You might hear that, oh gosh, this industry is trading at 6 times or 8 times earnings. Well, but that's probably for bigger transactions, right? A $25 million business driving $10 million to the bottom line might get 6 or 8 times earnings. But in the same industry, $1 million business is only getting 1 to 3 times earnings. You got to understand those things, because once you understand how the business is valued, you can get a realistic view of that business, of the business value, determine where you want to be, and then you can kind of build a strategy to get there. So the other thing I wanted to throw in on that is many times the business owner establishes the value of his business at what they think they need to retire on.
Yeah.
And by the way, that is not a valid methodology to value a business, right? So you think you need $5 million to retire on, so I need to sell the business for 5 million. But if the business is only worth 2 million, you need to put a plan in place, a strategy in order to be able to get to that 5 million. Now, I would also argue that many small business owners, and I have no horse in this race, but many small business owners don't have a financial advisor who can tell them what they need to sell their business for. And many times it's a number that they're just pulling out. I think I can survive the rest of my life on 5 million. Well, that's what a financial planner does for you. They can tell you how much you need, what value you need to get in order to live your lifestyle for your life expectancy. And so again, it's just based on these things that we make up in our mind, and it's not based on hard cold facts. We, by the way, do free valuation reports. So if one of your listeners really wants to understand kind of how a business is trading in their industry, I'd be happy to do a free valuation report. You can find it right on my website. Click the free valuation report, answer the questions, and I'll tell you what the industry is trading on. So that's kind of that issue number one is that unrealistic value. Did you want
No,
to get
it
into?
makes sense. And it's really a lot of what I see or what I'm even hearing from you right now is it's all in the entrepreneur, all in the owner's head at that point is okay, what the value is. They're basing a lot of that. And even going back to your point of saying, yeah, you make a better CEO than an employee kind of a thing. A lot of times with the sale, you're probably looking at the leadership or at least the CEO, not necessarily being part of that sale. And
Yeah,
too many times, especially even in earlier stages or smaller stage businesses, I see a lot of the value of the business basically being in the CEO's head, that it hasn't
yes,
been translated out to the rest of the industry. And that's probably where you'd go with execution that you're talking about. But still, it's one of those that's like, okay, if the whole knowledge, if the whole all the proprietary, everything's in the owner's head, if there's no process, there's no systems, there's no actual value to the business itself. It's the value is the owner at that point. And if
yep.
the owner's stepping away, then yeah, your valuation is going to plummet for sure at
Well,
that.
yeah. So let me touch on that. I call that owner dependency. If a
Yeah.
business is dependent on the owner, then if you're kind of under 5 million in revenue, and that kind of is that threshold where you don't have a lot of infrastructure in place, you haven't implemented EOS, you don't have a good leadership team, but a lot of that kind of resides in that owner's head. If that's the case, the business may be worth zero.
No. Yeah.
May be worth zero because all of that knowledge, that tribal knowledge that goes away when the business is sold. Now, if you're in a larger business, if you're in $100 million business and there's a lot of things still in the CEO's head, you're going to take a haircut. You're going to probably get a 20% discount on the value of the business. But if you're a very small business, your business is almost worth zero if it is totally dependent on you. And that's why, as at the risk of being giving a shameless plug to what you do, that's why small businesses need EOS. That's why I am such a huge fan of that system. It's a system to go out and identify those things and fix them so that the business can ultimately be worth more. I look at what you and I do kind of on the same, we're kind of on the same plane here. We're the things that we're both doing are attempting to make businesses more valuable. And so EOS, I'm a huge fan of doing that. I wish as I told folks, I wish I'd read it 20 years ago, except it hadn't been written yet. Right.
Well, 20 might have been, that was the very early days, but still no. But to your point, that's where I look at EOS is it really comes in and builds or rebuilds the foundation under the business to say, okay, give you a solid foundation in how you manage people, how you manage processes, things like that. And that gets that knowledge out of the owner's head to say, okay, yes, we can build a business more than just you. Makes it easier to scale and grow in the initial stages. But to your point, hey, it's got a lot more value. There's a lot more to the business than just you at that point.
That's
And
it.
that really gives, to, at least in my opinion, it gives so many benefits to the owner is like, okay, even if you're not trying to sell today, you can actually step out and have a vacation for 2 weeks and the company's not going to fall apart because it's not just you. It's one of those of really being able to give yourself a little bit more freedom. But yeah, especially in your case, and where we'll kind of talk about is looking at that exit, that okay, you can actually get some value out of this, or there is some value there to hand off to your kids, whatever you want to do, kind of a thing with an exit from the company. But it's more than just you, and it's not going to just vanish once you step away from it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a real challenge, and it's more than just that, though, right? It's all about having your processes in place. It's about clearly documenting things. It's about having good financials in place. I'll tell you a story without revealing any name. I looked at buying a company late last year, and I asked for the financial statements, and what I got was the P&L. And I said, well, this is great, except I need the rest of the financial statements. And the question was, what do you mean? Could I have the balance sheets? Could I have the statement? I can create my own statement of cash flow. I don't necessarily need that, but can I have the balance sheets so I can see? And the answer was, oh gosh, we really don't use that. How do you do your taxes? how,
Yeah.
how are you running your business without a balance sheet? You got to have a balance sheet. And so that's an extreme example, right? But most business owners don't really understand the mechanics of their financial statements. And so they've got to get that stuff in order. They got to have their corporate records in order. They've got to be able to produce data, because one thing I will tell you, that once you decide that you're going to sell your business, and let's say you're fortunate enough to be kind of in that 17% group that gets a solid offer for your business, that you have to be able to produce data. That's called due diligence. You have to be able to produce the data very quickly, because the slower you produce it, the worse the outcome is going to be. And if you can produce data really, really quickly, you're probably going to be in good shape. But most businesses can't. They don't know how to slice and dice their revenue numbers and their profitability numbers. Most businesses can't tell you how profitable they are by item, or by customer, or by salesperson. Those are things that you have to do to kind of get your business ready. And we have a laundry list of like 500 points that we examine in every business. To these are the things that you need to have ready. Is every buyer going to ask for that? No. But if you have all of it ready, you can be very responsive, and you can get to a closing of the transaction that much faster. And so there's why a lot of businesses aren't prepared. They haven't documented their processes. They don't, nobody knows, how you do things, and it all, even if it's not the owner's head, it's Billy Bob, who's been sitting over there doing purchasing for the last 20 years. He's the only guy that knows the relationships. He's the only guy that knows we get this from here and that from there. And if we buy on Tuesdays, we get a discount. You got to document all of that stuff, right? And that goes to making a business more valuable, probably more than you bargained for in that answer.
Well, no, and it actually makes sense, because I'd say a lot of it, what you're talking about, is looking at obviously business evaluation and business exit. But when you're talking about even just knowing how profitable each product is, kind of thing, that's something that you really need to know a whole lot earlier than that, just to be able to make real decisions. Because a lot of times you see that, especially even just with the smaller but even bigger companies, that it's too many times decisions are based upon either incorrect, unknown information, the gut feel kind of stuff. It's like, okay, if you actually had that information, if you had documented, okay, here's our 10 products, where are they profitability today? Where are they next month, a year ago, kind of a thing there, you can make informed decisions on, okay, we really should be Xing out that product line. That product line is not making us any money. It's been trending for 2 years now. But if you don't know the numbers, you just keep going down that path because, well, overall we're profitable. So when we got 10 products, we must be okay. It's like you could be a lot more
Yeah.
profitable if you had 5 that were actually producing than all 10, kind of a thing there. But they just
Well,
don't know the
and
numbers.
then you wind up with something like COVID hitting, right? That changes the trajectory of the business, and suddenly your business is in half of what it was. And although that rising tide of profitability had been kind of hiding all those stumps, suddenly the tide goes out, and now you see all those exposed stumps. And now what do I do with this, right? How do I go out and fix this? If you methodically go through and work on those things, relentlessly on your business, you can fix all of that. I want to give you another example. I bought a company in Chicago a number of years ago, It was a $33 million distribution company, and they were losing about $3 million a year. But in due diligence, we uncovered why. And so I bought the company at a bargain basement price, right? I got it because it was losing money, right? And instantly, I came in and identified, here are the 5 customers where we're losing money. I mean, and big money on these big 5 customers. I called the salespeople. I said, let's go visit them, because I'm going to tell them that either A, we have to renegotiate our contract, or B, they're welcome to go elsewhere. I can't service the business like this. We went out, we visited all 5 of them. 2 of those companies left us. 3 of those companies agreed to a price adjustment to get me to at least a break even. And we went from losing $5 million a year to making $1 million a year overnight.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not a rocket scientist. I just got in there and figured out, I know where I'm losing money. Let me go fix that. And then I could set a strategy in place to not get in that death spiral again.
Yeah.
But I got the company at a great value, turned it into a very profitable business, and exited it. And it's just not, but it's the things that business owners don't think about. A lot of business owners, if you own a restaurant, you come in and you stir the sauce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you come in and you start talking to customers, or you talk to other folks. You get involved in the day-to-day of the business. It's all about stepping back and taking time to work on your business rather than in your business. And when you do, you can really start to identify and uncover these things that can change the outcome of the value of the business, and ultimately get the business to the exit strategy that they want.
Yeah. And even more to that point, a lot of times I'll find that those, especially the entrepreneurial types, but those business owners, they're expert in whatever their field is. So my background was technology. So I'd be an expert down the technology path. Business financials, that's, yeah, they're numbers, and I'm a numbers person, but still that's not my forte. That's not my area. So that tends to get neglected if I don't make the effort to say, hey, find somebody that is an expert, somebody that is good in that area, come help bring that on, kind of a thing there.
Yes.
Otherwise, like I said, we end up operating without the numbers, or we operate without the sales, because I'm a big process person. So we're going to focus on the process operation side of the business. Like, well, it doesn't matter if you got a great operation. If you don't have anybody to sell it, then
Yep.
you don't have a business, kind of a thing there. And that's really where I see a lot of the areas of business that they have expertise in are typically the strongest areas of that business. The other areas are weak, just because either they don't bring in the expertise, or they try to do it themselves, and that doesn't work well.
When we start working with our clients and kind of going through our process of improvement and helping them get ready, I hear very frequently, especially from the small businesses, under 5 million, and the smaller you get, the more acute it is. Most of those folks are not financial people, and they say, I hate looking at the financials. I don't even understand the financials. I hate looking at it. And so we go through a process to really educate the business owner on how you use the financials and the things that you can discover and uncover about your business that are hidden in plain view in the financials. And I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, after walking through that and going through the process of understanding it, and then budgeting it, and then forecasting, and then doing a cash forecasting model, most business owners go, man, I can't wait for financials day. I get my financials today, and now I can understand it, and I know what I need to be looking at. That's what I want, is those light bulbs to go off, that, if you're really great at doing X and you hate this part of your job, we can teach you to love that part. Or if you can't, let's go find somebody that can love that part, because it is so important to driving the value of the business.
Yeah, and even what you were saying is like, okay, yes, you're looking forward to financial day. You're not looking forward to doing the books yourself. You got somebody
Yeah.
else that knows that expertise, that's bringing you hopefully the right answers in terms of that right pane of glass that has the right details on it that you can actually see and understand. So yeah, you do have to have the level of understanding, but it's still not a case that you're sitting there doing it all. You're not trying to teach them to be an accountant or a CFO or anything like that. You're bringing in that outside expertise there, which is really what I am always suggesting from them. It's like, okay, find your lane of expertise, and then hire people smarter than you to go bring that other stuff to you. That, yeah, you still need to know it, but you don't need to necessarily know how the sauce is exactly made. You just need to know that, okay, it is being made. All the customers love it. It tastes great. I don't need to go stir the pot myself. I just know you're handling it well.
Right. I learned this from one of my mentors a few years ago. Even if you do know everything in the business and how to do it, one of the tips for when you are on the market and you have a prospective buyer walking through, at least pretend like you don't know how to do some things, right? And ask other people. And I got this from a great friend of mine who was a mentor of mine for a long time. And he said, as he's walking around, because he's done a number of successful exits. One of the intentional things he does is when he's walking around, he'll walk into an office and he'll be telling, oh, here's Bobby, he does this, and here's Susie, she does that. And you walk into an office and go, and Chuck, I don't even know what Chuck does. Hey, Chuck, what do you do? And so it's now saying that, okay, I am not the repository of all the information in the
Yeah.
business. And then Chuck will step right up and explain what he does, right? So what do you do again, right? And so it's kind of one of those tips to do that. Now, obviously don't mislead but if you have somebody actually doing the work, don't pretend like you know everything, because the value of the business is in the people and the processes and what you're doing, and those are what's carrying forward, right? So that's so important.
No, it definitely is, and I would even argue that it's important again, even before then, to say, "Hey, you're empowering your people. You're giving them that confidence that yes, I am a true part of this, not that I'm just being micromanaged or I'm just the robot type sitting here following the process and stamping the end product." That it's like, okay, I do have some true value here. Even like I said, if that is the owner's expertise, hey, we can still bring in people in that area of expertise and bring value to it. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
building a team and the culture at that point too, even beyond the sale.
Yeah, it's not, of course, we focus our time on exit planning, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out what that ideal outcome looks like so that we can build a strategy to get there. But yeah, as I always say, a, a great exit strategy drives business strategy. So if you understand how your business is valued, then you can make decisions that improve the value of the business over time. It doesn't mean drive everything by exit strategy, but the exit strategy, if you understand what your exit strategy is, you can do things to drive additional value. And you may choose, if you're at a crossroads and I can do this or I can do that. Well, which one of these improves the value of the business? Let's go that direction, right? And it helps kind of give clues to what the business strategy is. One of the things that is very alarming to me is that 74% of business owners, this is all of them, right? There's 6 million plus 6.2 million businesses that employ people in the United States. There's another 22 million solo entrepreneurs, right? But there's 6.2 million businesses that employ people. 72% or 74% of those business owners have no exit strategy at all in place. I, we're working with a client now that his strategy is, I'm just going to die behind my desk. I understand that you want to work
Right.
until you die. However, let's get a strategy in place so that your family knows how to deal with this, right? And that they're prepared to take over this business, or that it can be sold very rapidly after that fact. I get, I'm a baby boomer, and baby boomers just like to work. We like to work, as I tell my millennial children, uh, uh, my generation invented the 60-hour work week. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And but we just like to work, right? It's what gives us value. And that's one of the drivers that makes business owners delay thinking about their exit strategy. But if they have a solid exit strategy, it can help drive business strategy as well. We always recommend to our clients that they do something like EOS, so that they can drive their business strategy. But the clues there on what needs to go in the quarterly rocks, right? Where are
Yeah.
we going to be? What's our vision? Those come from the exit strategy, right? And those are things that you can do to improve the value. The other alarming stat I wanted to share with you is that I think it's 54% of businesses that want to sell right now. So of all the businesses that want to sell right now, 54% of them have no exit strategy. look, it's not like selling a house. You don't call a realtor, say, hey, come over, stick a sign on my yard, and 3 months later you're out,
On.
sipping
Yep.
margaritas and moving into a new house. It just doesn't work like that in business. And so for most business owners, this is a once in a lifetime transition, right? And so the more you plan for this, the better the outcome is going to be. I mean, we could talk all day
Oh
about
yeah, yeah. No, and unfortunately, running out because yeah, I've loved it, but no, that's kind of the thing I always look at is like one way or the other, you're going to exit the business. So it's like okay, is it going to be on your terms in a profitable situation, or is it going to be just a train wreck kind of a thing? But it's like one way or the other, you're going to exit the business. So obviously, the more you can plan for that, the more you can hopefully do that in advance. And like you said, not call up the realtor and say, "Hey, I want to sell today," because you're not going to get the value for sure if you try pulling that.
it.
That
Right.
you can actually do this in a better way. To your point of okay, even if the exit is simply the business is not going away, we're handing it off to the kids or something like that. There's still an exit from it. There's still a way to hopefully build the value of it enough that, okay, when you do hand it off, it's got more value and they've got the ability to sit there and run with it, that it's not in your head, that you're not trying to retire and the kids are not still calling you up saying, hey, dad, how do we do XYZ?
Well, that's a great, by the way, I said, it's 83% of businesses don't transition that want to sell. 70% of businesses that want to do an intergenerational transition, so a sale to family, fail to get there
Yeah.
because the next generation is just not prepared for it. Or like what you said, hey, how do I do this? I've got a client in the Northeast that I was visiting with them. It's the patriarch and the matriarch own the business, and their son, in his 40s, kind of runs the business. But mom and dad have hold on certain things that he doesn't even understand. And so as we've talked about, how do we transfer that knowledge? Parents are like, I don't want to quit yet. I don't want to retire. I'm not asking you to retire. I'm just asking you to teach him how to do this stuff so that if something happens to you guys, he's not completely dumbfounded and stopped right at a roadblock. How do I do this? And it was interesting with that particular client. We've been working with them for years. Um, that COVID actually drove the parents to finally release those things because they couldn't come into the office. They were in the high risk category. And so the son's like, okay, well, now you got to tell me how to do this. Right.
Yeah, no, it's been 2020 was an interesting year and I think forced a lot of people's hands in a lot of areas. So yeah, it was obviously not great, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I think it did force some good transitions out there. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, we're unfortunately running out of time. Like I said, I'd love to keep talking with it, but if people want to learn more about business evaluation, about how they're going to structure an in plan, where can they find some more information about you or reach out to you there?
Absolutely. Right on my website. It's Mastery Partners, master with a Y, masterypartners.com. You can find me there. There's a link there to schedule a telephone call with me or a Zoom call like this. Or you can call me on my cell phone, 817-797-1488. I always answer that.
Oh, nice. And I would say you've got your own podcast going, don't you?
I do, the Maximize Business Value podcast. If you'll allow me to give an unabashed, uh, commercial for my book. Our book, Maximize Business Value, came out last year. Our new book is going to be coming out maybe even by the time this podcast is out. Maximize Business Value is kind of where we brand. You can find our podcast anywhere, all the same places that you found this podcast, but it's just the Maximize Business Value podcast. And it is really tricks and tips and things that we've learned through the years, just great content, interviews with folks like you, Jeff, on how to improve the value of your business. Lots of tips and tools like that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get all that in the notes right here below so we can have easy access to all that. But yeah, I appreciate the time, appreciate the insight. It's, like I said, a little bit different interview than we're used to, but I think still a very, very valuable content, very valuable insight. Because like I said, most people just simply don't think about the exit or we're too focused on today. And it can drive, like you said, decisions you make today should be based upon that. And obviously, the more you can plan, the more you can get value out of it. So I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Hey, this has been totally my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Building to Scale podcast. If you would like to share your entrepreneurial business growth story, please visit buildingtoscale.com/guest. If you got something out of this interview, would you do both us and our guest a favor and share it on your social media accounts? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your player so that you don't miss any future episodes, and make sure to reach out to Jeff Chastain on any of the major social media networks, or check us out at admentis.com.